I realized very early on that using the dollar as a measuring stick was a trick the elite used to manipulate the masses. Through the insidious process of inflation, the elite can shift power from us to them. The more money they print, the less the dollar buys. When you understand that prices are not necessarily going up as much as the purchasing power of the dollar is declining, then you have made an important intellectual leap. In May of 2011, when silver got close to its 1980 high of $50 an ounce, everybody was crowing that it was the bubble top. The reality is that $50 in 1980 had a ton more purchasing power than it does now. 31 years of debt and money printing has cut the value of that $50 tremendously. If you go by the rigged Bureau and Labor Statistics numbers, adjusting for inflation, silver would have to get back to $143 an ounce just to get back to its inflation-adjusted highs from 31 years ago. If you are using real inflation-adjusted numbers, like those from John Williams at shadowstats.com, then silver needs to at least get to $450 an ounce. And that is just accounting for inflation. When you factor in decades-long physical deficits of silver, trillions of unfunded liabilities, and the mathematically inevitable worldwide fiat currency collapse, the case for silver is even stronger. I knew the dollar could not be trusted as a measuring stick, so I started to search for something else to guide me. I found that ratio investing was the best way of overcoming this dollar-centric view of the world. The idea is simply taking the currency out of the equation and simply divide asset by asset to get its ratio of purchasing power. It is also important to use this line of thinking when you look back in history to make historical analysis of real purchasing power of silver, as we have seen with my historical case of $960 silver. Most importantly, this line of thinking will help you see values that we are investing for in a post-dollar world. So here are the 3 big charts that I watched for silver for the past 7 years. The first chart is the one that literally got me to bet the house on silver in 2005. When I got out, the ratio was 42,000 ounces of silver for the average house. Now it is close to 6,000 ounces for the average house. Using the ratio, so far the real purchasing power of silver has gone up over 600%. That's great and all, but I believe that we have much further to go. I can tell you from first-hand experience that we are nowhere near the bottom of housing. First, until jobs come back, there will never be a recovery in housing. There is a huge shadow inventory in housing of either foreclosed homes held off the market or homes where people have not paid their mortgages in years. Then there's the whole MERS mess, the mortgage electronic registration system that has not been resolved. Think about how many houses were sold with fraudulent documents. I mean, would you feel comfortable buying a house with a title that the bank may not even own? We also have ridiculously low interest rates that are artificially supporting the housing market. I'm not that old, but I seem to remember when 3.9 was a pretty good deal on 60-month financing on a car, and now we have that for 30-year mortgages. If you are like me and believe that inflation is running at 10+% in the real world, when you factor in the stuff that the Federal Reserve does not, like food and fuel, you actually have negative interest rates in housing. Even with this incredible artificial support, we are now starting to look at a double dip in the housing market. Let's get 2 steps ahead of the crowd. Say things do go to hell in a handbasket. The dollar crashes, interest rates skyrocket, necessities like food and fuel moonshot, wars, civil unrest, cats and dogs are friends, mass hysteria. What would that do to housing? At the very least, it would make it impossible to finance your house. What's your house worth without a 30-year mortgage? If you have a house that is worth $250,000 and interest rates that are at 4.9%, and for argument's sake, say that we did not have to factor down payment, taxes, or maintenance, your payment would be $1,316 a month. That is maybe something that people can afford right now. What if we go through this dollar collapse scenario, which I believe is 100% mathematically inevitable, and you are lucky to find a couple that can afford that payment and they're willing to buy your house, but say now interest rates are at 10%. You would have to sell that house for $150,000 to get that exact same payment. You see, people don't buy homes or cars based off of the asset. They buy it based off of the monthly payments. What if interest rates went to 20%? That would drop that $250,000 home to $80,000. And all of that is contingent on that couple even having a job or a down payment or being creditworthy, which is becoming increasingly harder to find. I also believe that during this collapse environment, local governments will become so desperate that they will be raising property taxes on a declining housing market. We are 3 years into this housing depression, and most property taxes have either stayed the same or are higher than they were at the bubble. Another factor to consider is what is a McMansion worth if the cost to run the house goes up. $1,000 a month in water or electricity bills would certainly cramp any housing price. What if jobs don't come back and more people go to live at home with their parents? What if we go back to multi-generational housing? That would leave a lot of inventory on the market in addition to the huge overhang from the last bubble. One other thing to consider is your safety. What is your property worth in a city during riots or worse? The time to buy property is when there's blood on the streets. Baron Rothschild. So real estate is out in my book. The average home price is about $246,000. The 200-day moving average of silver is at $36. So we are at a 1 to 6,833 house to silver ratio. Judging by my first chart, we could still see a 400% real return still in the house to silver ratio just to get back to the 1980 high where the average house was $72,400 and silver popped to a $50 high, which would make that ratio 1 to 1,448. I still think there is a very strong case that we could blow by that because we are in much worse shape as a country than we were in 1980. The next big chart I look at is the Dow to silver ratio, and we are just now getting back to the mean average of the Dow to silver ratio. This is after 10 years of silver outperforming stocks. At silver's 1980 peak, it reached a 1 to 18 Dow to silver ratio. That would almost be a 2,000% real return in purchasing power if we were to go to that ratio again. I would argue again that we are in a much worse scenario than we were in 1980. This market is now admittedly being propped up by the plunge protection team and high-frequency robo-trading. The Greenspan put of the 90s has turned into the Bernanke guarantee. The average dividend of Dow stocks is a paltry 2.6%, which after taxes and inflation is nothing. The Dow is double what it was in the middle of the crisis of 2008. If we go through the same kind of crisis this time, there will be no safety nets of savings that we did last time. On top of that, having my money sitting in a brokerage account in Wall Street does not sit well with me, especially after the MF Global scandal. The final chart I look at is the gold to silver ratio. Once again, we are just getting past the mean average. If we go to the 1980 high, we could still see a rise in real purchasing power against gold. The ratio that gold and silver come out of the ground is 1 ounce of gold for every 10 ounces of silver. And yet there is a 1-to-1 ratio in the amount of dollars that goes into gold and silver with Sprott Asset Management, gold money, and even the U.S. Mint bullion sales. We understand that gold has been treasured as a precious metal and silver has been trashed as an industrial metal for decades. On top of all of this, the paper manipulation on Wall Street, with the Andrew Maguire testimony, I think we will overshoot the 1980 high of the 1 to 14 ratio. Finally, we have the mathematically inevitable collapse of the dollar. When this happens, all paper assets will get burned. Only real tangible assets will thrive. I cannot find another asset that has the opportunity that silver presents us today. When the day does come, when I find another attractive asset class, I will use my tax-free strategy that I present in the Ultimate Exit Strategy to plow my real purchasing power into a new asset. Until then, I will keep my eye on these 3 charts and keep holding my physical silver.